Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive with us. Today we are diving into something that's really got people talking. The future of international students in Canada and, their hopes of becoming permanent residents. You sent us some really interesting stuff on this. News articles, YouTube videos, even like historical deep dives from the Canadian Encyclopedia. So clearly this is something you all really care about.
Yeah, for good reason. What we're seeing is this clash of policy, personal experience, and even how history kind of repeats itself. It's complicated, and for the students involved, it's life-changing stuff.
It really is. So our goal today is to get through all the noise
Yeah.
and give you, the listener, the clearest picture we can of what's going on. And man, things are changing fast. Like just this month, the Canadian government made a big announcement that really shook things up.
You're talking about that ICF Monitor article, right? The one about the post-graduation work permit program. Yeah, that was a big one. Those changes are going to hit hard, especially for students starting at Canadian colleges soon.
Because of that November 1, 2024 deadline, that's coming up quickly. For anyone who's not super familiar with all the immigration stuff, can we back up a bit?
Yeah.
What's the big deal with this post-graduation work permit program?
Sure. Basically, the Post-Graduation Work Permit, or PGWP, it's like a bridge. It lets international students stay in Canada after they graduate and get some real work experience, which is often, essential for applying to become a permanent resident. So it's a pretty big deal if you want to make Canada your home.
And you can see why that Canadian government video from 2018, the one you sent, really stuck with people. Study, explore, work, stay. It painted this really appealing picture, almost like a promise that Canada's this welcoming place with a clear path to settling down.
But here's the thing, and we see this all the time in history. Canadian immigration policy, it changes. Remember that Canadian Encyclopedia article you said? It shows how Canada's always tried to balance needing new talent with worries about how immigration might change things socially.
Yeah, it's like we're watching history repeat itself right in front of us.
Exactly. Back in the 19th century, it was Irish Catholics escaping famine that caused a stir. They were seen as changing, like the whole character of urban Canada. Sound familiar?
Very familiar. Today, it's often non-European immigrants causing those same anxieties, even though Canada relies more and more on immigration to keep the economy growing. That's like we haven't really learned from the past.
And part of that past means looking at the bad stuff, like the Komagata Maru incident from 1914. Imagine being a South Asian migrant, a British subject at the time, and being told you can't even set foot in Vancouver just because of your ethnicity. It's a harsh reminder of how exclusionary policies can be, even in a country that says it values inclusivity.
It's one thing to look back at history and see these patterns, but seeing it happen now, through the eyes of the people actually going through it, it's powerful stuff. Those Awaz YouTube videos you sent, they really showed the human cost of all these policy changes.
It's true. Hearing those firsthand accounts, the frustration, the anxiety, even like a sense of betrayal, it really hits home that this isn't just about, numbers and rules. These are real people's lives we're talking about.
And one thing that really got to me was the word morcha, that activist Bikram Kulawalia used in one of the videos. It just speaks to this deep anger and frustration, way beyond just being disappointed with a policy change.
Right. Morka, it kind of translates to hostile demonstration, but it means so much more in the South Asian context. It brings up this whole history of resistance, of having to fight for basic rights, even when you're being told you're not welcome.
Which takes us right back to that historical context, right? The
Yeah.
Komagata Maru incident, the worries about Irish Catholics changing Canada. These weren't just abstract debates for the people living through them, They were real, personal, and they shaped how entire communities were treated.
And you hear that same feeling in those Awaz videos, that sense of being lied to, being told, come here, study, work, stay, and then suddenly the rules change. It creates so much uncertainty, so much distrust.
And a huge financial burden too, right? International students already pay way more for tuition than domestic students. Then add in how expensive rent is everywhere in Canada, and it's a recipe for real hardship.
And it just seems so unfair. They come here, invest in their education, contribute to the economy, and then get told they're the reason for the housing crisis. Come on.
It's like they're being used as scapegoats, or soft targets, as one student called it. They didn't create this housing crisis, but they're the ones feeling the pain. It just doesn't sit right.
It makes you wonder, if they're not the ones to blame, then who is? What are the real underlying problems here? And who benefits from pointing the finger at international students?
Okay, so let's dig into those bigger issues then. We've talked about the personal stories, the historical context, but what are the actual arguments being made in this whole debate?
So on one side, you've got the government saying these TGWP changes are necessary. They're saying it's about housing affordability, labor market needs, and managing the immigration system better.
Basically, trying to walk that tightrope between attracting global talent and keeping those anxieties about immigration in check, right? It's that same tension we keep coming back to.
Exactly. But then you've got critics saying the government is taking the easy way out. Instead of fixing the root causes, like why isn't there enough affordable housing, they're scapegoating immigrants, turning Canadians against newcomers.
And the frustrating part is, it's not as simple as saying all immigration is good or bad for housing, for instance. That CBC article you sent, it did a good job showing how complicated it is. Like, it pointed out the huge gap between how many homes are being built and how fast the population's growing. That's a major factor in the housing crisis, and it's got very little to do with immigration.
And then you've got those puppy mill schools, remember? That same CBC article talked about them. These schools exploit the system, promising students residency if they enroll in these, like, often low-quality programs. They're profiting off people's hopes, and it reflects badly on all international students.
It's a mess. There's no other way to put it. But it feels important to remember that blaming an entire group of people for complex problems almost never leads to good solutions. So if blaming international students isn't the answer, then what is? What might the future hold?
Well, it's like they say, right? Tough times never last. But really, the future for international students in Canada, it's up in the air right now. The rules keep changing, and that's got to be stressful for anyone trying to plan their life.
For sure. And it feels like a lot of this comes down to a disconnect. Canada wants global talent, we know that.
Right.
But are we actually making those people feel welcome, like they can build a life here?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's tricky. Look at those PGWP changes we talked about, the ones favoring STEM fields, healthcare, trades. You could say it's just Canada being practical. We need more engineers, nurses, skilled workers. Makes sense to prioritize them, right?
But then what about the artists, the teachers, the people with big ideas who also want to come to Canada? Are we saying they're not valuable if they're not in those specific fields?
It's something to think about. What kind of Canada are we trying to build? One that's all about the bottom line, or one that values different skills, different ways of seeing the world?
And it's not just about money either. Remember those Awaz videos, that feeling of betrayal, of having the rug pulled out from under you? Those are real people. They took a chance on Canada, invested so much.
Exactly. And when policies change like this, when it feels like the system's against you, it makes people lose trust. Like they're not really wanted, just useful for a little while.
It's a shame because Canada benefits so much from having international students, not just for the economy, but for the culture, the different perspectives they bring.
Right. But those Awaz videos, they do give some hope, you know? Seeing those students organize, speak out, challenge the narrative, that's powerful. It shows they're not giving up, that they're holding Canada accountable.
It reminds you that change doesn't usually come from the top. It comes from people coming together, sharing their stories, demanding better. Even with all the uncertainty, there's still power in speaking up, in fighting for what's right.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And to everyone listening, this whole deep dive, it shows how important it is to stay informed, to listen to the people directly affected, and don't be afraid to ask tough questions. Challenge the way things are, demand better from our leaders.
Because this isn't just about immigration policy, is it? It's about what kind of country we want to be, what we value, how we treat people who choose to make Canada their home.
And that's a conversation worth having, so keep learning, keep asking questions, and thanks for joining us for another deep dive.